The trial had been going on for 3 hours, and Ambassador Rena Okonkwo had not been allowed to sit down once. The Dragon Council chamber was built to make smaller species feel worthless. The ceiling rose so high that clouds actually formed near the top. The floor was polished obsidian that reflected the flames burning in massive braziers along the walls. 12 dragons sat on elevated platforms arranged in a half circle, each one large enough to swallow a shuttle whole. Their scales caught the firelight and threw it back in colors that hurt human eyes. Rena stood in the center of this spectacle, a small brown woman in a simple gray diplomatic uniform. She kept her hands clasped behind her back and her expression neutral. She had been trained for moments like this. She had not been trained for moments quite this bad, but she adapted. Elder Sovereign Morthax was speaking again. He was the largest dragon present, his scales a deep black that seemed to drink in light rather than reflect it. His voice echoed through the chamber like rolling thunder. The human infestation in the Valen Reach is a violation of the Accord of Eternal Flame, he declared. This accord, signed by every spacefaring species 40,000 years ago, grants the Dragon Council dominion over all territories we have claimed. The Valen Reach was claimed in the year of the third expansion. Your presence there is illegal. Rena waited until she was certain he had finished. Dragons considered interruption a killing offense. With respect, Elder Sovereign, she said, the Dragon Council abandoned the Valen Reach 800 years ago. When our colony ships arrived, the region had been empty for centuries. Under the reclamation clause of the same accord, abandoned territories may be settled by other species after a period of 500 years. Morthax's eyes narrowed. The reclamation clause applies only to species recognized by the Council as having achieved maturity. Humanity has been among the stars for 300 years. You are children playing with tools you do not understand. The clause does not specify a maturity requirement, Rena said calmly. I have the original text if the Council wishes to review it. A younger dragon on the far left shifted on her platform. Her scales were a pale silver, and her eyes held something that might have been curiosity. This was Counselor Silthara, the youngest member of the Council. She had been watching Rena with unusual attention throughout the trial. The human speaks correctly about the text, Silthara said. Perhaps we should examine the legal foundation more carefully before. Silence. Morthax did not even look at her. The law is what the Council decides it is. We created the accords. We determined their meaning. Rena filed this exchange away for later consideration. Dissent within the Council was rare. It might be useful. The Council has deliberated, Morthax continued. We find humanity guilty of territorial violation. The sentence is complete withdrawal from all dragon-claimed space within one solar cycle. The chamber fell silent. Even the fire in the braziers seemed to quiet. Rena understood what this meant. Dragon-claimed space covered 60% of all habitable worlds in the known galaxy. Humanity had settlements on 43 planets within that territory. Withdrawing would mean abandoning billions of people, collapsing their economy, and cramming their entire civilization into the remaining scraps of unclaimed space. It would mean slow extinction. Elder Sovereign, Rena said, keeping her voice steady, I request time to consult with Earth before responding to this sentence. A decision of this magnitude requires input from our full government. Morthax made a sound that might have been laughter. It sounded like mountains crumbling. You wish to send a message to Earth and await a response. How delightful. Your fastest ships would take 14 months to reach your homeworld and 14 months to return. We have given you one solar cycle. That is 12 of your months. He leaned forward, his massive head descending toward her. We have been tracking every human vessel in the galaxy, Ambassador. We know exactly what you are capable of. There is no ship that can save you. There is no hope. Rena looked up at him without flinching. I understand. Do you, I wonder? Morthax settled back on his platform. Your species has a reputation for foolish optimism. You spread across the galaxy like a disease, breeding and building and dreaming of futures you will never see. Other species learned their place. The Melori did not, and now no one remembers their name. The Velthari resisted, and we burned their worlds until they knelt. But humans, he shook his head slowly. You smile even as the fire approaches. It is almost admirable. Almost. We believe in being thorough, Rena said. We like to consider all possibilities before accepting an outcome. There is only one possibility here. Morthax raised one massive claw and pointed at her. Surrender or die, those are your options. Choose wisely, little ambassador. The guards escorted her out of the chamber. As she walked the long corridor back to the human diplomatic quarters, her communication device vibrated against her wrist. She glanced at it casually, as if checking the time. 3 words glowed on the screen, transmitted on a frequency that should not exist, using an encryption that had never been registered with any galactic authority. The light awaits. Rena allowed herself a small smile. She did not look up. She did not change her pace. She simply walked on, a small human woman in a galaxy of giants, carrying a secret that had been 200 years in the making. The dragons thought they knew everything humanity could do. They had tracked every ship, monitored every transmission, cataloged every piece of human technology. They had missed something. 200 years before Rena stood in the Dragon Council chamber, a different woman stood in a different room and watched a civilization die. Director Abiola Mensa was 43 years old. She had gray in her hair and lines around her eyes from too many years of looking at screens in dark rooms. The screen in front of her now showed a planet called Melori Prime, homeworld of a species humanity had just discovered existed. The Melori were beautiful. They had 4 arms and skin that shifted colors with their emotions. They had built cities that floated on magnetic currents and composed music that made human listeners weep with joy. They had just invented faster-than-light travel, their first ships venturing out to explore the stars. The Dragon Council had noticed. On the screen, dragon warships descended through the clouds of Melori Prime. The Melori had no weapons capable of fighting back. They had not thought they would need weapons. They had thought the universe would welcome them. The dragons did not even announce themselves. They simply began burning. How many? Abiola asked quietly. 14 billion, said the technician beside her. His voice was hollow. Estimated extinction within 6 hours. Abiola watched the cities fall. She watched the floating platforms crash into oceans that were already boiling. She watched escape ships try to flee and get swatted from the sky like insects. Did anyone else try to help them? No, the other species are all staying silent. They are afraid. Of course they were afraid. The dragons had ruled the galaxy for 40,000 years. They had destroyed dozens of species in that time. Everyone knew that challenging the council meant death. Abiola turned away from the screen. She could not watch anymore. Get me Admiral Silva, she said, and Dr. Tanaka. We need to begin Project Safeguard immediately. The project had been theoretical until now. A plan for the worst-case scenario. A way for humanity to survive if the dragons ever decided they were next. The plan was simple in concept and nearly impossible in execution. They would build ships that could not be detected. Ships that moved in ways dragon science said was impossible. Ships that could carry enough humans to rebuild civilizations somewhere far beyond dragon reach. They would do this in secret, over decades or centuries if necessary. They would hide the construction across hundreds of facilities. No single person would know the complete design. No transmission would ever mention the project directly. They would become ghosts building ghost ships. Dr. Yuki Tanaka was the first to arrive at the meeting. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and hands that were always moving, sketching designs on whatever surface was available. Fold space technology, she said before anyone else could speak. The dragons say it is impossible. They say space cannot be folded more than once without collapsing, but their mathematics is wrong. I have been working on this for years. They made assumptions that do not hold at quantum scales. Admiral Roberto Silva entered next. He was a large man with a soldier's bearing and a politician's caution. "This project will cost more than anything humanity has ever built," he said. "We will have to lie to our own people about where the resources are going. We will have to maintain the secret across generations. One leak, one mistake, and the dragons will know. They will destroy us before we can finish." "Yes," Abiola said, "all of that is true. And if we succeed, if we build these ships, we will be running away. We will be admitting that we cannot fight them." Abiola looked at him steadily. "Can we fight them?" Silva was quiet for a long moment. "No." "Then we survive. We endure. We make sure that humanity continues even if we lose everything else." She gestured at the screen, which still showed the burning world. "The Melari had 14 billion people this morning. By tonight, they will have none. No one will remember them. No one will speak their name. They will be erased so completely that future generations will not even know they existed." She leaned forward. "I will not let that happen to us. And more than that, I will not let that happen to anyone else if we can prevent it." "What do you mean?" "I mean that while we are building our escape ships, we will also build something else. Fast ships, small ships, ships that can reach dying worlds and collect what remains. Genetic samples, cultural archives, the last recordings of species the dragons think they have erased." Abiola's eyes were hard. "The dragons believe they can destroy entire peoples and face no consequences. We will prove them wrong. We will remember what they want the universe to forget." The project began that night. It would continue for 200 years, passed from one generation to the next like a sacred trust. The ships were built in pieces, assembled in the dark spaces between stars. The records of the lost species were gathered and preserved aboard vessels that existed outside normal space. The dragons never suspected. They tracked every human ship, monitored every human transmission, watched every human world. They saw a young species struggling to find its place in a hostile galaxy. They did not see the ghosts moving in the shadows. They did not see the light being kept alive in the darkness. Not until Rena received her message and smiled her small smile in the corridor of the council chamber. Not until it was far too late. The dragons did not wait for their deadline. 3 days after the trial, a human medical frigate called the Gentle Hope was traveling through the outer reaches of the Valand system. It carried 400 refugees from a small mining colony that had received the evacuation order. Most of the passengers were families with young children. The Dragon warship appeared without warning. It was a massive vessel, its hull covered in scales of living metal that shifted and rippled like a predator's skin. The commander's name was Varax, and he had been burning human ships for sport since before Rena was born. "Human vessel," his voice boomed across all frequencies. "You are in violation of the evacuation order. Surrender your ship for inspection." The captain of the Gentle Hope was a woman named Daishi Amara. She had been flying medical ships for 30 years. She had never carried a weapon in her life. "Dragon vessel, we are a medical transport carrying civilian refugees. We are traveling toward the evacuation corridor as ordered. We pose no threat." "All human vessels pose a threat," Varax replied. "Your species breeds too quickly and thinks too slowly. You are a contamination that must be cleaned." He paused. "But I am merciful. I will give your passengers 1 minute to reach the escape pods. Then I will destroy your ship. This is more than your kind deserves." Daishi did not argue. She knew it would be pointless. She ordered all passengers to the pods and stayed at her controls until the last moment. The escape pods launched in a scattered pattern. 40 small vessels, each carrying 10 people, drifting into the black void of space. Varax destroyed the Gentle Hope with a single blast. Then he turned his attention to the pods. He destroyed them one by one, slowly. He wanted the passengers in the remaining pods to watch. He wanted them to understand that there was no hope, no escape, no mercy for their kind. He broadcast the entire massacre across galactic channels, entertainment for Dragon viewers, a warning for everyone else. But Varax made a mistake. He was so focused on his cruelty that he did not notice one pod drifting away from the others. He did not see the shadow that passed over it, blacker than the space around it. He did not see the pod vanish, not into fire, but into something else entirely. 39 pods were destroyed that day. 390 people died. 10 survived. Varax never knew. On the colony world of Valen Prime, Governor Priya Sharma watched the broadcast in her office. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady when she spoke to her advisors. "The dragons want us to panic," she said. "They want us to run in all directions like frightened animals. They want to pick us off one by one." "What choice do we have?" one advisor asked. "We cannot fight them." "No, but we can refuse to give them the satisfaction of seeing us break." Priya looked at each of them in turn. "Continue the evacuation. Stay calm, stay organized, and trust that there is more happening than we can see." Some of her advisors believed her. Most did not, but they followed her orders because there was nothing else to do. Back on Dravith, Rena continued her diplomatic efforts. She filed appeals that she knew would be rejected. She requested meetings that she knew would accomplish nothing. She walked the corridors of the council complex with her eyes down and her manner humble. But every meeting was actually a mapping exercise. She memorized guard rotations. She noted the location of power conduits and communication relays. She identified the blind spots in the surveillance systems. Morthax watched her with amusement. He found her persistence entertaining. "You still believe you can change our minds," he said during one of their meetings. "It is almost touching." "I believe in being thorough," Rena replied. "My people do not give up easily." "Your people will learn. Pain is an excellent teacher." Counselor Sulthara was also watching, but with different eyes. She had been observing the humans since the trial began. She had expected to see fear. She had expected to see desperation. Instead, she saw something strange. The humans were afraid, yes. They were grieving for their dead. But beneath the fear and grief, there was something else. A calmness that made no sense. A patience that should not exist in a species facing extinction. They were waiting for something. Sulthara began to wonder what it might be. The days passed. More ships burned. More colonies emptied. The deadline approached like a wave about to break. And then Morthax summoned Rena for what he called the final humiliation. "You will broadcast humanity's surrender," he told her. "Every species in the galaxy will watch as you admit your inferiority. This is my gift to you, Ambassador. A chance to spare your remaining people by showing them that resistance is futile." Rena bowed her head. "I will do as you ask, Elder Sovereign. I ask only one thing in return." "You dare to bargain." "Not a bargain, a request. I ask that the broadcast reach everyone, every species, every world, every station. I want all the galaxy to hear humanity's message." Morthax laughed his mountain-crumbling laugh. "So you wish your humiliation to be complete? Very well. I will grant this request. Every corner of the galaxy will watch you kneel." Rena nodded slowly. "Thank you, Elder Sovereign. That is exactly what I wanted." The Grand Broadcast Chamber was the largest room on Dravith. It had been built 10,000 years ago specifically for moments like this. The walls were covered with screens that would carry the transmission to every corner of the galaxy. The ceiling was a dome of crystal that showed the stars above. Every seat was filled with dragons, thousands of them packed into viewing galleries, their scales gleaming with anticipation. This was entertainment of the highest order, a young species brought to its knees, a reminder to all the galaxy of who truly ruled. Across thousands of worlds, billions of beings watched. The Velthari, who had knelt to the dragons 3,000 years ago and never risen again. The Kreth, whose homeworld had been taken and given to dragon colonists. The Mosslings, who pretended to be simple creatures because they had seen what happened to species that showed intelligence. And the humans. On their remaining ships and colonies in their homes and shelters they watched too, waiting, hopping, praying that the rumors were true. Morthax stood at the center of the chamber, his black scales absorbing the light around him. "Today marks the end of human arrogance," he announced. His voice carried to every receiver in the galaxy. "For 300 years this species has spread across the stars like a plague. They have ignored our laws. They have settled our territories. They have behaved as though they were our equals." He paused for effect. The dragons in the galleries hissed with pleasure. Today they will learn the truth. Today their ambassador will speak the words of surrender. And tomorrow we will begin the cleansing of all human space. He turned and gestured toward the entrance. "Bring her forward." Rena walked into the chamber alone. Her gray uniform was wrinkled from days of confinement. Her hair was uncombed. She looked exactly like what Morthax wanted her to look like, a broken, defeated creature accepting the inevitable. She walked to the broadcast platform at the center of the room. The screens zoomed in on her face. Every being in the galaxy could see her clearly now. Morthax loomed over her. "Speak, human. Tell your people to surrender. Tell them that their brief adventure among the stars is over." Rena looked up at him. For a moment she said nothing. The silence stretched across light years. Then she spoke. "I have a message from humanity," she said. Her voice was quiet but clear. "But it is not surrender." Something changed in the room. The dragons shifted uneasily. Morthax's eyes narrowed. "You dare?" "I dare." Rena pressed a device on her wrist. "I dare because my people have been preparing for this moment for 200 years. I dare because we saw what you did to the Melori, and we decided that we would not share their fate. I dare because we built something you never imagined possible." Above Dravith, the sky changed. A ship appeared from nowhere. It was not large by dragon standards, perhaps half the size of a dragon cruiser. But it was there, hanging in the sky above the seat of galactic power, in a place where no ship should be able to exist undetected. The dragon's sensors had not seen it approach. Their scanners could not identify it even now. It was simply there, a dark shape against the stars, impossible and undeniable. Then another ship appeared, and another, and another. 12 vessels in total, arranged in a perfect circle around Dravith. The hidden fleet that humanity had spent 2 centuries building. The Last Light and her sister ships, each carrying thousands of humans in stasis, each equipped with technology that broke every rule the dragons thought they understood. The chamber erupted in chaos. Dragons roared and beat their wings. Guards drew weapons. Morthax bellowed orders that no one could hear over the noise. But the broadcast was still running. Every being in the galaxy was watching. Rena raised her voice above the chaos. "You spent 40,000 years conquering. We spent 300 years learning. We spent 200 years preparing, not to fight you. We knew we could not win that war. We prepared to survive you." She pointed at the ships in the sky. "These vessels cannot be detected by any technology you possess. They move through fold space in ways your scientists say is impossible. And they are not just empty shells. They carry the genetic records of every species on Earth. They carry our art, our music, our history. They carry enough colonists to rebuild human civilization 1,000 times over." She turned to face the cameras directly, knowing that every oppressed species in the galaxy was watching. "But that is not all they carry." Morthax had recovered enough to speak. "Destroy those ships," he commanded. "All weapons fire now." The dragon fleet responded instantly. Hundreds of warships opened fire on the human vessels. plasma beams and missile barrages and weapons that had destroyed entire planets before. The attacks passed through the human ships as if they were made of smoke. The ships were not just hidden. They existed slightly outside normal space. They could not be touched. Rena smiled. As I was saying, Elder Sovereign, there is something else on those ships, something you need to see. She pressed another button on her wrist. And on every screen in the galaxy, new faces appeared. Not human faces. Faces that had been erased from existence. Faces that belonged to species the dragons had destroyed. The Melari, the Vorathi, the Silent Ones of the Rim. 7 species in total, each one supposedly extinct, each one speaking now through preserved recordings and reconstructed voices. We remember, they said together, we exist, and we are no longer alone. Aboard the last light, Fleet Admiral Nadia Osei watched the chaos unfold below with quiet satisfaction. She was 62 years old. Her mother had worked on the ship's engine design. Her grandmother had helped select the construction sites. 4 generations of her family had devoted their lives to this project, knowing they might never see it completed. Now she stood on the bridge of a vessel that should not exist, surrounded by crew members who had trained in secret facilities hidden across the galaxy. They had given up normal lives for this. They had accepted that they might spend their entire careers preparing for a moment that might never come. The moment had come. Admiral, her communications officer said, "We are receiving transmissions from across the galaxy. Thousands of them." "Show me." The screens filled with messages. The Velthari were speaking publicly for the first time in 3,000 years. The Kreth were demanding the return of their homeworld. The Mosslings had dropped their pretense of stupidity and were broadcasting in perfect standard galactic. Every species that had been crushed under dragon rule was finding its voice. But the most important message came from somewhere closer. Counselor Silthara had stepped away from the other dragons and was addressing the cameras directly. "I have served on this council for 200 years, she said. Her silver scales seemed to glow in the light of the broadcast. "I have watched us destroy species for crimes as small as developing the wrong technology or settling the wrong world. I told myself it was necessary. I told myself it was our right as the eldest species." She paused. The other dragons stared at her with growing fury. "I was wrong. The humans have shown me proof that we erased 7 intelligent species from existence. 7 peoples with their own cultures, their own dreams, their own right to live. And I did nothing to stop it. I am ashamed." She turned to face the cameras fully. "I formally request asylum aboard the human fleet. I reject the Council and everything it stands for." Morthax moved faster than his massive body should allow. His claws extended, reaching for Silthara's throat. "Transport her," Nadia ordered. A beam of light enveloped Silthara. One moment she was in the council chamber. The next, she was standing on the bridge of the last light, blinking in confusion. "Welcome aboard," Nadia said. "You are safe now." Silthara stared at her. "That should not be possible. Your transporter beam passed through our shields as if they did not exist." "Many things that should not be possible have happened today." On the planet below, Morthax was roaring with fury. His claws had closed on empty air. A member of his own council had been taken from right in front of him, and he had been powerless to stop it. "This changes nothing," he bellowed. "You cannot hide forever. You cannot run far enough. The Dragon Council will hunt you across the universe. We will burn every world you touch. We will destroy every ship you build. We will erase you more completely than we erased the others." Rena's voice came through the broadcast system. She was still standing in the chamber, surrounded by hostile dragons, completely calm. "You misunderstand, Elder Sovereign. We are not running. We are not hiding. We are here above your homeworld and you cannot touch us." She spread her hands. "But more importantly, you have missed the point entirely." "What point?" The ships, the technology, the fact that we can exist outside your reach, none of that is what matters. Rena pointed at the screens showing the faces of the preserved species. They are what matters. We spent 200 years gathering the remains of everyone you destroyed. We have their genetic material. We have their cultural archives. We have recordings of their final moments, their last words, their dying wishes. She let that sink in. You thought you could erase entire peoples and face no consequences. You thought that once they were gone, they would be forgotten. But we remembered, we collected, we preserved. And now the entire galaxy knows what you did. Across the galaxy, the broadcasts were having their effect. Species that had been silent for millennia were speaking up. Trade agreements were being canceled. Military alliances were being questioned. The careful structure of dragon dominance that had lasted 40,000 years was cracking. Not because of the ships, not because of the technology, because everyone could see clearly and undeniably what the dragons truly were. You built an empire on fear, Rena said. You maintained it by making examples of anyone who challenged you. But fear only works when people believe resistance is impossible. We just proved that it is not. Morthax lunged at her. His claws could have torn her apart in an instant. Another transport beam activated. Rena vanished, reappearing on the last light beside Silthara. Morthax's roar of frustration echoed across the galaxy. Nadia turned to Rena as the ambassador materialized. Well done, better than we planned. The plan was to survive, Rena said. Everything else is a bonus. Silthara was still staring at the screens showing the preserved species. Can you really bring them back? The Melori, the others? Some of them, Rena said. We have enough genetic material to clone individuals. We have enough cultural records to teach them who they were. It will not be the same as if they had never been destroyed, but it will be something. Why? Silthara asked. Why would you spend 200 years preserving species that could never help you? What did you gain from this? Rena looked at her for a long moment. Nothing, she said. We gained nothing. That was never the point. Then why? Because someone had to remember them. Because it was wrong to let them be forgotten. Because we are human and this is what we do. 1 year later, the galaxy had changed in ways that would have seemed impossible before the revelation. The Dragon Council still existed. They still had the largest fleet, the most territory, the most resources. But they no longer ruled unchallenged. The Velthari had stopped paying tribute. The Kreth had reclaimed their homeworld. Dozens of smaller species had formed a coalition that refused to bow to dragon demands. The old order was dying. Something new was being born. Rena stood in the chamber of the newly formed Galactic Assembly. It was a modest space compared to the Dragon Halls, but it held representatives from over 200 species. Many of them had never spoken to each other before. Many had been enemies for centuries. Now they sat together, trying to build something better. The motion to establish protected zones for developing species passes with a 2/3 majority, the chairman announced. Any world with a pre-spaceflight civilization will be off-limits to all expansion. It was a small victory, one of hundreds that had accumulated over the past year. Each one chipped away at the foundations of dragon supremacy. Morthax had tried to stop it. He had threatened war. He had actually launched attacks on several human colonies, but the attacks had failed. The human ships that could not be touched had defended every target, and each failed attack had made the dragons look weaker. Fear was a fragile foundation for power. Once broken, it was nearly impossible to restore. Captain Daishi Amara commanded one of the new fast-response vessels. Ships designed to reach endangered species before they could be silenced. She had saved 3 civilizations in the past year, arriving just ahead of dragon fleets that had come to deliver punishment. She never forgot the gentle hope. She never forgot the 39 pods that had burned while she survived. But she channeled that grief into action. Every species she saved was a small victory against the darkness. Governor Priya Sharma had become a symbol of human determination. Her colony in the Valen Reach had not been evacuated. It had been defended. She had stood on the surface and watched human ships hold the line against dragon attackers. Now she led efforts to rebuild what had been destroyed during the crisis. And Silthara had become something no dragon had ever been, a bridge between species. She worked with the preserved peoples, helping them reconstruct their cultures and find their place in the new galaxy. The Mallory clones were growing in carefully tended nurseries. They would never know their homeworld, but they would know their history. They would know their songs and their art and their stories. The other preserved species were being revived in their own ways, some through cloning, some through digital reconstruction, some through careful cultivation of the genetic material that remained. It would take generations to bring them back fully, but the work had begun. On the anniversary of the revelation, Rena visited the memorial vault aboard the Last Light. It was a quiet space, filled with holographic displays showing the faces and artifacts of the 7 preserved species. She was not alone. Representatives from each of those species had been invited. Some were clones, newly grown and learning who they were. Some were digital reconstructions, speaking through holographic projectors. Some were simply recordings, voices from the past playing one last time. They did not thank her. Thanks would have been inadequate for what had been done. Instead, they told her their names. I am Kelara of the Melori. I was a composer. I wrote music that made people feel joy. I am Verath of the Vorathi. I was a teacher. I helped young ones understand the universe. I am the last song of the Silent Ones. We did not speak with words. We spoke with harmonies. Listen. A sound filled the chamber. It was not quite music. It was something deeper, something that resonated in the bones and the heart. It was the voice of a species that had been erased, speaking again after 1,000 years of silence. Rena listened. Tears ran down her face, but she made no move to wipe them away. This was why humanity had worked in secret for 2 centuries. This was why they had sacrificed so much to build ships that could not be touched, not for power, not for revenge, not even for survival. For this, for the sound of a dead species singing again, for the names being spoken by voices that should have been silenced forever. The dragons had tried to erase entire peoples from existence. They had nearly succeeded, but they had missed one thing. They had not counted on humans. In the council chamber on Dravith, Morthax sat alone. The other counselors avoided him now. His authority had been broken by his failures. He was still Elder Sovereign in name, but no one feared him anymore. He stared at the screens showing news from across the galaxy. The Galactic Assembly passing new resolutions. The coalition species expanding their territories. The preserved peoples being welcomed back into the community of intelligent life. He had ruled for 3,000 years. He had destroyed civilizations with a word. He had been the most powerful being in the known universe. Now he was watching his empire crumble, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The humans had not defeated him in battle. They had done something worse. They had proven that he could be survived. They had proven that his victims could be remembered. They had proven that 40,000 years of power meant nothing against a species that refused to forget. In the memorial vault, the last song of the Silent Ones faded into quiet. The representatives of the preserved species stood in silence for a moment. Then Kelara of the Melori spoke again. What will you do now, Ambassador, now that you have changed everything? Rena considered the question. We will keep building, keep learning, keep remembering. She looked at the faces around her, living and digital and reconstructed. We will make sure that no one is ever erased again, not if we can help it. And if the dragons attack again, then we will survive, we will endure, we will keep the light burning, she smiled. It is what we do. Outside the ship, the stars burned cold and distant. The galaxy was vast and dangerous and full of beings who would destroy without a second thought. But in that vault, surrounded by the memories of those who should have been forgotten, a small group of survivors stood together and planned for a better future. The dragons had tried to shame humanity. Instead, humanity had shown them what it meant to remember.